Welcome to Changing Suits. We're your hosts, Bao
and Taj, discussing the latest news, views, and general life for us Western Asians.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, changing_suits, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Hi, welcome to Changing Suits. My name's Bao.
And my name's Taj.
Now, on today's episode, we are going to be discussing the controversial topic of whether we still love boys more than girls. Now, obviously, in the past, we know that the Asian community has very much favoured having boys, and we're all very happy when we have boys. But has life actually changed that much? What do you think, Taj?
I think it has changed a lot from like 10, 20 years. Yes, definitely. But there's still those underlying differences. Now, why don't we kickstart with something that we were talking about last week or a couple of days ago even, when we were talking about wills, when I pointed out something that you didn't even realise. Do you want to talk about it, Belle? Because it is your story to tell.
Okay, so as we're getting older, we're starting to think about, if I wasn't here, who would I give my £1 billion fortune to?
Yeah, you wish.
Yes, I wish. And how you split it, you know, what goes into the will. It's just a topic you have to think about as you get older. And basically, the conversation between us was, in the good old days, it would be property, your assets, everything goes to your son, right? Because your daughter's going to get married, and you know, obviously you're going to get her married off to a billionaire who can look after her and treat her like a princess, or the queen, should I say, right? Now, when we were discussing it, I was like, oh, I mean, something you brought up, to be fair. Okay, let's actually say what actually happened. You've actually said, why would you not split it 50-50? And I'm like, oh, see, I hadn't even thought about that.
And at that point, I realised how backwards you were.
At that point, to be fair, I actually at that point realised how backwards I was. I hadn't even thought about it like that. And I was like, okay, that is a good point. I mean, you know, life is throwing so many people curveballs. You don't know where anyone's going to end up. So,
and how did you wait before we carry on? How did you do your split then?
Well,
yeah, I like the way there's a big pause.
Well, the pause is there because it made me think after we spoke, and I was like, actually, no, you're right. It shouldn't be 100% to him. Not that I would have given him 100%, but it shouldn't quite be more to him, less to her, that sort of thing. So yeah, it made sense, 50-50. So, but the fact that automatically it didn't even come into my mind. I don't know why. Obviously, I was having one of those days, those blonde moments, should I say?
Bao, I don't think you were having one of those days. I think it's just something that's ingrained into us, and basically we just don't give it a second thought, because it was, if you think about it, the jameen, the land, went to the boys, and there was no consideration of it going to the girls. Now, obviously, now this is a different scenario now. But you're in your mind. I'm not trying to say that. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but in your mind, basically, you were still back in the day when the boy got everything.
Hey, I just admitted it. What else do you want me to say?
I just want it to be clear to the listeners what you're about.
Whoa. Okay. I'm also here to listen, listeners, so just give us your views.
Yeah.
I changed my view because I agreed with you. I'm like, no, that is a good point. I mean, what if he ends up being the billionaire and she needs my billion? By the way, just to clarify, I don't have a billion, so no one tried to kill me or anything like that. You're not going to get very much out of me.
A fiver, maybe? Yeah.
I mean, only on a good day. But anyway, so but it did bring topic to the forefront, and it was a conversation point. Have we changed our way of thinking? Do we still celebrate boys more than girls?
I would say that we still do, because basically when a boy gets married, quite often they stay with the family or close to the family, not even if it's not in the house, and the girl would get married a majority of times away from the family and go closer to the boy's family. Obviously there are circumstances where this isn't the case, but generally it still happens.
All right, let's look at the history. I think that's important to look at. Why was it first given to boys? I mean, let's cover that, because our listeners might not be aware of these things. So basically, in the good old days, boys were the breadwinners, right? So they'd go out to work, they'd make the money, girls would end up staying at home cooking, I guess, and looking after parents, being the caregiver, right? So boys got educated, they would have looked after the family financially, whereas girls couldn't do this. But then obviously what that meant was, once she got married, she'd be looked after by her husband. Now, I know this is a very much old school way of thinking. The other thing was the dowry cost, something that obviously goes on now, which we will discuss later on in this podcast, I'm sure. But life's changed. Women are working alongside the males. So usually, I mean, pretty much doing double the work that they were doing before anyway, having to be the caregivers, plus on top of that, have a job. So life has changed. But then why haven't we and our minds changed? Where's the issue?
I think it's almost like media, the propaganda that you know when you watch.
You are hating the media every time.
I know. I've realised that.
Having a go at the media.
No, it was just something that just sprung to mind. But for example, Bollywood films. I know I hit on Bollywood films as well, but these are like, when you're the happy dancing, and they were in your head. They were like, this is what life's going to be, and that's pretty much how we've gone through growing up, thinking, okay, boys get this, girls get this, and it's still like that. Because if you think about it, the boy generally, I'm not saying all the time, would be looking after the parents. So you'd want almost a thank you. Here you go. Here's your money for looking after us, almost. And it shouldn't be like that. And it has changed. But again, it's not changed for everyone, because it still happens in quite a lot of places, in India and stuff like that. And still here. Let's not just say it's India. Here as well it happens.
I think this podcast, and we are the perfect people to talk about the gender bias, because obviously there's three of us girls and our brother, not my brother, and just about the fact that you being the second daughter, me being the third daughter, and me knowing that my parents weren't happy when I was born.
No, I have to admit they weren't. I'm not going to say that they were.
Hey, they weren't overjoyed when you were born as well.
That is true as well. But I remember when you were born, like Dad came home and it was.
Oh man, not another one.
It wasn't even funny. It was really depressing. It was almost like someone had died. I'm not being out of order, but it was. The mood was really somber, and it was like, oh, so he needed to tell my nanny, because they didn't find out beforehand. Because at that time, I think it was they weren't telling parents what gender they were having. Around that time, my mum was pregnant and stuff like that. They
and aren't we so glad they weren't telling? Because I don't think I'd be. No, I'm joking. Who would you be doing your podcast with had I not been here?
That is true. But so I can remember, and it stayed with me for my life, basically. And my mum, when she had me, she was crying out of happiness. No, she wasn't out of happiness. She was crying because she was sad that she's had another girl. And her dad, our nana, said, look, basically, buck up, stop crying, and just people want to see you cry and be down. And you just need to get on with it and not make do, but it was like, get on with it. You've had 3 girls. It's not the worst thing in the world. And for a man in that time to say that, how old am I? I'm not going to reveal, but quite a number of years ago to have said that is.
But let's just also reveal that they had 3 girls as well. So we have 2 Marcia and 1 Mama. So it's the same structure, family structure there.
Exactly. So he must have been obviously talking from his experience. Girls aren't that bad. They do bring some joy to life. just some, a glimpse.
Just a little bit.
But we had to face this, the 3 sisters had to face this a lot in our lives, where we were seen as Oho Kavildara. So basically, our parents, they've got 3 daughters, and there's a lot of burden on them. And this is something that we had to hear all the time from various relatives, friends. And do you remember when we went to India once and we were walking through the Bend, so the village? Do you remember that?
Yep. That,
And
I was going to say, look, although you're saying that, and I don't know if I'm just seeing life in more of a rainbow sunshine type of way. I mean, the only time I ever felt like that was this experience that you're about to say. Other than that, I mean,
I think
I had my head in the clouds.
I think so. You must have been living in cloud cuckoo land because there was a lot of it. So this particular time we were walking in India, not in India, in a bend, so a village, you
In
know,
India.
in India.
Mm.
And there were the 3 sisters, and there were people standing outside their houses. In those days, they did not sitting in their houses cooped up like it is now, and they were shouted across the street or the gully to each other or the street, and they were like, "Oh my god, that's so and so's girls," and the other one's like, "But there's 3 of them."
We know how to bring the town down, is how I took it.
It wasn't like that. It
It
was
wasn't
like,
like that.
"Oh my god, there's 3 of them. He had 3 daughters. Oh my god, that's really bad." And we all 3 of us were so upset that he said that. And we did go back to our aunt, so our boy, and we told her, and she was really angry and she was going to go and have a go at them. But we were like, "Don't worry, it's okay. We'll live with it. We're scarred for the rest of our lives, but we'll live with it."
See, I'm okay. So I do remember that, and yeah, that's the only experience where I felt like it stuck with us. Where it's like, oh my god, it was 3 girls. But you know,
You say that. Another thing is like our brother being married, the only brother with
ah,
3 sisters.
yes.
Would you want to? And you say that you didn't feel that you experienced this, but would you want to get married into a family where there were 3 sisters? Three, the 3 witches.
we we will ask our sister-in-law. And to be fair, I feel like we overcompensate now. She's probably had to shut your mouth or thing. Because we do, like now, I get what you're saying, and now you've sort of mentioned that we are overcompensating by saying, look, is it okay what we're saying? Like, we don't want to be one of those sister-in-laws. We overcompensate to the point where she probably thinks, okay, chill out, man. Like, seriously. Of course, we'll get her on the podcast and she can tell everyone how great we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No pressure on her. But
Of course we do.
yeah,
Of course we do ask her to pick her favorite as well.
no pressure. But there was that issue for our brother as well, being the only brother, that
Yeah.
he had 3 sisters, and basically he'd have to go and visit all these 3 sisters and all the cultural things. There
I'm
is
sorry.
that.
I'm sorry. When was the last time he came to see you? In reality, in reality,
No, but people think the backwards way of thinking, where the brother has to give the sisters all this sort of stuff whenever he goes a visit, whenever he comes round, he has to give them something because
do you
it
know
comes
what?
from
I'm
mum and
actually going
dad.
to take advantage of this and actually say this to him. Come around more often because you're supposed to come around. You're the brother.
But
Let's
it
do this
does.
then.
But that is what someone would think. Basically, if there was a girl, well, he is married now, but yeah. So yeah, so you lived in Cloud Cuckoo Land, obviously. So we did, probably because we were older than you, experience all these things about us being a burden on our parents. And when our brother came along, it was hallelujah. The world has saved us. We have a brother. And it's quite apparent that our parents wanted a son because they had 3 daughters and then they stopped at the son. And that happens quite a lot in Asian families.
But then, see, this is the thing, and this brings it back to, has it really changed? Because I have many people that I know where we pretend, and I put little speech marks in there. We pretend that the girls are are equal, but we'll still stop at the son, right?
But for example, I'll tell you in my own situation, and I'm going to be really upfront. When I had my daughter, I was happy, but I thought, "Oh my god, what's everyone gonna think?" And now, for God's sake, years ago, people used to think that, but still, I've got that mentality in my head. And then when I had my son, I cried out of happiness thinking, "Oh my god, I don't have to have any more children." And it's still there. And no matter how much we pretend that we've got that equality, it still is not there. Because if a family has only got daughters, people do still judge. And the family that does have the daughters, they have to almost say, "No, we don't care. We've got two daughters." But obviously, you do because you're saying you don't care that you've got two daughters.
Like, it's always thought that the son will look after the parents. Usually is like that even now. So
Yeah,
if you don't,
traditionally, it's like them.
well, if you don't have that, and the girls are married off, then it does become tough. And we can pretend now that it doesn't matter, but it does, because I know loads of situations where the parents are by themselves, or someone's in my mind that we know, the wife has passed away, and now the dad is by themselves. They only have one daughter who is married, and he's by himself. So it does make it tough if we do stick to this traditional way of thinking of once they get married, the son stays nearby. It doesn't. I'm not necessarily saying in the house, but nearby, and the daughters have to go wherever they need to go. But then, how do you change that? Is the question, because that would be the biggest thing, I think. Because we all know. I mean, as kids grow up, even people that have boys, they have their own share of problems between the boys, right?
But maybe in like our kids' generation, things will change.
If it
With us,
hasn't, if it hasn't changed in our mind, and you said it yourself, it wasn't the case of, oh, I am biased and I just want a, I don't mind if it's a girl. It was literally ingrained in your mind that I hope this is a boy, and that was a natural response. It wasn't something that you. It
want,
wasn't. It
yeah.
was a subconscious thought, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So if it hasn't changed in our generation, then how can we say it's going to change in the next generation? If that stuff that's ingrained in us.
I think it may change because think, for example, there are higher divorce rates. And before that wasn't accepted like 20 years ago, but now it's almost become the norm. Obviously, you've got all the stigma attached to it, but things are changing even with that. I don't even know if our kids want to get married in the future. Things are changing that much. So I think there is slowly but surely, I think things will change.
But it also comes back to how we then bring up our kids. And I know a lot of the podcasts we've done already, we always say how we're going to educate our kids. But this, before I had kids, this was one thing that I always thought, where, how we dress up boys in blue and girls in pink, that then has an influence later on as to how they develop. Now, one thing I found having my kids, yes, we did do that, pink and the blue thing, if it wasn't white and yellow. But I found naturally my son did go towards cars, and I didn't push it on him.
But that's because your husband likes cars. So he followed, and I've seen that he does a lot of things that your husband does because he uses him as a role model. I mean, for myself, I used to put pink on my son. And I remember basically and I used to live in Norway, and the reason why I had done it was for a very stingy reason, is because we used to buy many layers of clothes, and the first layer was wool. And it was pretty expensive to buy the layers. So I thought I'm just going to reuse it for my son. And then when I FaceTime my dad, he's like, "Ekifier, what have you put on him?" Oh my god, shock, shock, horror. I've put pink on my son. And in quite a lot of the photos, he is in pink. And so even we've got that gender where we think, okay, we better not keep them in pink.
That didn't stop you though, did it? You just being
It
cheap.
didn't stop me. It didn't stop me because I was being cheap. And I don't think it's a big issue. And my daughter, she doesn't go, she says it, I don't know if she's doing it just because she wants to be different, but she's like, I don't really want to wear that much pink. I like different colors, and I want to wear t-shirts with planets on them and dinosaurs. Mum, why can't we find that in the shops? I was like, it
That's
doesn't.
that's interesting, the fact that you can't find it in the shops, because then this is not just a small issue within the Asian community, it then becomes a bigger issue in the community as a whole, doesn't it, really? If
Yeah.
you can't find those tops.
Well, let's talk about that. Like, for example, if we're going to go out just on an occasion, the girls will wear Indian suits, but the boys, they can get away with wearing just trousers and shirt.
Oh my God, do you know what? Do not get me started on. We've had this on the weekend where I had the same conversation with my kids. I said to her, my little one, "Look, you need to wear a suit," and she's like, "But then, my son isn't wearing, whatever he. Why isn't he wearing a suit?" Oh my God, it's such a headache. I swear, it's such a headache.
And the way we handle that is just be quiet and wear the suit.
I'm like, yeah, basically, because I didn't have time that day either. I ain't got time for this argument. Get ready.
But they should wear, the son should wear, which I don't do, even though I'm arguing. The son should dress up as well and wear a kurta pajama.
Hey, wait a
Uh,
second. I got him to wear jeans. I mean, the fact that I got him to wear jeans was my dress up. I usually have jogging bottoms otherwise.
No, but we're pushing our kids to have this divide because we're like, no, you got to wear the suit, but it's okay for the boy just to wear casual stuff that they would wear every day. So we're implementing those bias.
And this is what I'm trying to say to you. How are we expecting our kids then to get out of this gender bias if it's us enforcing it? Because again, it's been naturally ingrained, right? We're going to go through later on in the podcast. I'm going to cut this a bit short, only because I think a few things that I've researched on as to how we can move away from this gender bias and hopefully change kids' generation at least a bit. But I just wanted to pick up on something you said earlier, because we picked up on the fact when we were born, our mum and dad were a bit upset and that there were so many girls. And also when they saw your son dressed in pink and my dad went crazy. But I want to be fair on them, because the way dad especially has changed over the years has been incredible and also been very important in our lives.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, from a man that came from India, a really traditional way of thinking where boys go out to work and the girls stay at home, to someone that's changed. They say leopard can't change his spots. He's the exception to the rule, I will say. I mean, he's pushed us every way he can. I mean, from the start, when we were younger, he used to encourage us to go to martial arts because he said that's really important for a girl. Well, at that time, we didn't have our brother, but for a girl to learn self defense, for a girl to be independent. And there was a point in his life where things did change and where he wanted our older sister to get married when she was 16. But that changed because he was just an old way of thinking. But that changed when he, like, in the family there were some divorces, some really messy ones, and basically he realized that a girl should not depend on a man and she needs to be independent. She needs to have her own education, and things from there, it just pivoted. And the amount that he's pushed us and pushed us, especially you, well, he
Yeah.
pushed us all, but he pushed you a lot to go into politics and all these different areas, things that you wouldn't have done if he was still in that backwards way of thinking, to be honest.
And this is why I wanted to pick up on it, because although we've said in the good old days they were upset about it, the amount that he has encouraged us has been amazing and has meant that we've got to where we've got to. The martial arts thing was something that people weren't doing at that point very often, that for girls. Even as you know, I mean, you've moved when you got married 2-3 hours away, but he was like, no, you still need to carry on with your job. And that's literally how it was, because it was a case of you've got your own independence if you've got your own money and you've got your own job. And I think that's obviously shaped our lives for the better.
Yeah, definitely. But we still had those gender bias where it was important for the girls to learn how to cook and the boy not so much. I remember when our mum and our cousins, we're really close, so they used to do a lot of things together, and they used to go to a particular cousin's house, and we used to hate it when they used to go to these cousins because those girls were really good at everything. They could cook, clean, do this, do that, and when they used to come back, us and our cousin sisters were like, oh god, here we go again. They're going to say how wonderful they are and they can cook and do this. And it was really annoying that they used to do that. And it's like, okay, whatever.
Whatevs. Whatevs.
Whatever. It was a case of whatever. But it was important for them, like as girls, for them to teach us how to cook. And why was it important, Belle? Do you remember?
No, I can't actually remember.
God, where did you live?
I'm
It
sorry.
was important for us to cook because they said that if once we got married, they didn't want our mother-in-law to say that we couldn't cook. That was really important.
Well, yeah, but then this is something that is still that is going on in society, though, isn't it? The fact that you don't want to be the person, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. You don't want, and not just your mother-in-law, you don't want anyone to come back and say you don't know how to do this. So, if anything, it's not
Yeah,
just
but then why aren't we teaching our boys as well? They should have that. We don't want anyone to come back and say to them
well,
that they can't do anything.
but this is this is what I was trying to say. What are we doing to now change the next generation? Because look, the last generation came from wherever they came. They came from India. It came from wherever they came from, right?
Hmm.
So they had that mentality. But then what are we doing to change it for our kids? Because we're
Well,
from here.
what can we do? What do you want? I mean, I think,
Well, we should be teaching them how to cook.
yeah, both the genders. But
Yes,
there's still that even in our, like, because obviously our parents' ages, they're like, oh God, why are you teaching your son?
I don't think so.
You don't get that?
I don't think so. No.
Hmm. I think there are still um, people in the community at our parents' age that are still like, oh my God, why are you letting your son cook?
Well, I don't know what everyone else is doing. All I can say is if the people that I'm around, I don't think they would have an issue with it. Although saying that, I'm not saying that that isn't going on. So if,
But okay, you say that, but how much do you cook versus how much your husband cooks?
but see, he enjoys cooking as well.
But he doesn't cook as much as you.
He doesn't. But
You
then,
cook every day because you're expected to cook as the woman.
yeah, no, I agree with you. I think there is
So
that.
there's that gender bias still there. So you're saying that it isn't there, but it is there.
No, I agree with you. Whoa, calm down. I'm saying I agree with you, sister. Right? I do agree in the fact that our generation has that gender bias. But what I'm saying is the next generation, if I was to get my son to cook and my daughter to cook, I don't think there would be an issue with our parents or, my in-laws, for example. Not, I don't think anyone would say, oh my God, why are you teaching me how to cook? Or, why is he putting the dishes away? I think it's life skills that we're teaching them. Forget the gender bias thing. I mean, I don't actually enjoy my kids coming and helping me cook.
Oh
I hate
God,
the
it is
kitchen.
annoying.
I hate the kitchen on a good day. Having the kids in there where it takes even longer is just like the worst thing ever. But for life skills, this is what it's not about the gender bias. We need to be teaching them how to do this because no one knows where anyone's going to end up. Why are we assuming that they will get married and the girl will cook and all this sort of stuff? So they should know how to do it. And the other thing is, I mean, we can't say the older generation don't know how to cook. I mean, our mama knows how to cook. Our master knows how to cook. My dad knows how to cook, right?
Yeah, but they don't still cook every day. It's still expected of the woman to cook every day.
That's not true.
Well, now dad's retired, that's different. But I mean, when they were okay, all right, I get you.
You get what I'm trying to
Damn.
say. Well, I know in a majority of the households, the woman is still. But let's not look back. Let's look forward. I'm a forward-looking kind of gal.
So let's move on to a different area, divorce. Now, divorce rates are high now, and women are still blamed for the divorce, basically. Even if, for example, I'm not just saying that it always happens that it's the man's fault, but even if a man, for example, is abusive, the woman still gets blamed in the relationship when there's the breakup. Or if they go and have an affair, it's still the woman's fault. Society has not changed. I mean, I had an experience, and this is quite. I don't go around just talking to random people. Actually, I do. So I was going to the Godfather, and again, my cheapness. We didn't have a car at that time because it was expensive to get a car. So we used to go and use public transport, which quite a lot of people done in Norway because the public transport was pretty good. But I met a few women actually, and it was almost like week by week. I met these women and they were divorcees, and they weren't going to their usual Godfather or temple. They were coming to the one that we went to, and the one that they went to was about an hour away. And I go, okay, why aren't you going to your own one, the local one? And the reason for that was because they didn't want to be judged, and they didn't want anyone to know that they had a divorce, and they didn't want people to judge them. So out of shame, they were coming somewhere else because the community had made them feel as if it was their fault.
But then do you think that was also because, again, the woman ends up moving to where the guy's family is, in which case everyone around would be the guy's friends and family?
No, quite a lot of, even not even just like, quite a lot of the people, they would have built up relationships. They would have been even friends and stuff, not just family that are, having this, hey, it's her fault. It's friends as well that are blaming the woman. So no, I don't agree with that. I don't think it's just because they've moved to an area where the guy lives.
But the other part of the whole divorce thing is the fact that the community's opinions matter so much.
Well, this is funny because when we have weddings, and we have quite, like, before COVID, we were having quite big weddings, and I think they started again. And you used to, back in the day, you used to invite a whole Jeanette, so guests, because they would be your basically prove
Yeah,
that you've got
Rajola, yeah, yeah,
your
yeah.
vajola, to say, hey, if anything goes wrong, we'll help you, and we'll help you get through it. You don't get that anymore. Now it's like you're just inviting a whole load of people just to party, and when it's times are bad, I don't think people come and help you. You might get an odd here and there, but you don't get people who do. It's not.
But then this is what I'm trying to say. If someone's going through a divorce, and yes, your friend or whoever that lady was in Norway, was then going to a different place, why should we care what the community's saying? If you're doing the day to day, whatever it is, whether they're being abused or whatever it is.
Because the it matters still. It mentally, you're, even if anyone's not saying anything, it's still on your mind. Say if you were sitting in an office and someone was like, "Oh my god, she's smelly," or something. Um, you'd think, "Oh my god, they're talking about me. They're thinking about me," and this does psychologically play with your head. And what the community says does matter. You want to get to a stage. You want to get to a stage where it doesn't matter, but things do matter.
Yeah. Okay, so see, even the sort of mental health side of it, we are finding that Asian women are being affected. The depression rates have always been higher for women than they have for men, especially in the Asian community. And that trend is continuing even now. Why do we think that is?
Because Asian women are almost trapped. They feel that they can't talk to anyone, that they will be judged if they come out with, hey, this is happening at home, and almost blamed. And it is the case because they are getting judged by the community. It is the woman's fault of why the split happens. It isn't, but I mean, the community is saying that it is. And that's why they keep everything behind closed doors. The abuse, and it does happen in other communities as well. But I think it's more up there for the Asian community because as an Asian woman, you don't feel that you can reveal anything because you don't want to be judged. And that's why there's still the higher mental health problems with Asian women in the community because they don't feel that they can express themselves. And sometimes to the point of you'll keep the truth even from your own family because you don't want your family to be affected. You will be like, I don't want another person in my family to be divorced because you're worried that people will judge your whole family, not just you and just your immediate family, but your whole family, cousins, whatever. So you just almost put up with, for example, the abuse and whatever happens in the house.
The point I was trying to make before is I feel that sometimes that perhaps women tend to take on the pressures of society a lot more than perhaps men do. That might be because the pressure is on the women, so you have to care a bit more. But should we be in a position where that community and family responsibility lies on both shoulders and not just the female's shoulders.
Well, I think the only way that we can face this is if the community starts facing issues and bringing them to the forefront and not sweeping them under the carpet and willing to talk about them. That's the only way that we can move forward.
But I think they are, and the community is more open to it. I mean, if you think 15, 20 years ago, if someone got divorced, it would be the biggest headache in the world. But because it's become the norm, should I say, people don't want to get involved in other people's relationships. It's
there's less vachole now, so people that fix up couples, because they don't want that headache of being blamed for fixing up and then the marriage breaking down.
But this is what I'm saying. So yeah, that pressure was on the family, on both sides of the family. But now it's a case of you do what's best for yourself, which is why I'm saying perhaps the pressure of society has reduced because so many people are going through it. And it's like, okay, this is the norm. You can't keep pressurizing people because it's the norm. And that's where I was going with the previous comment.
I think it is the norm, but there's still, it's becoming more and more common that there's divorces, but there's still that, hey, oh, that woman, she's single, she's a divorcee. There's still fingers pointing, to be honest. It is, I will agree, 20 years ago, it was, oh my God, the world's going to end. It isn't so much that now.
Okay, so where do we go from here? Because we don't know if our kids will get married or the pressures of society. But you've sort of touched on a really important point where you've said, look, raise awareness. These are topics that are affecting both women and men, but perhaps more women. And that is perhaps why the mental health of women is suffering so much in comparison.
Well, we can begin going back from the beginning is teach our girls, for example, and our boys obviously continue, that it's okay, like, to get educated, to do what they want, to be independent. If you want to become an engineer, yes, you can do it. If you want to play football, go and play football. And try to step away from those bias and being in those boxes. That is what is going to take us forward.
The other thing is checking our own bias. So we started this podcast on the fact that we were speaking about wills. And I hadn't realised that what would naturally come to me, and realised that there was that bias. So checking our own bias is really important as well. Expose our brains to different languages. We don't sort of blink an eyelid when we say policeman. Perhaps we should be changing those words that we use, police officer, because there's plenty of police women that are doing it. So these little things maybe change society for the better, and also just get a bit of feedback on the fact that we do have these unconscious biases. Like I said, we started off on something where I had accidentally hit on a bias, which I hadn't realised until I'd had a conversation with yourself. Anyway, so listeners, we're going to end this podcast here. And just wanted to find out your experiences. Look, we've had our own experiences of being 3 girls in the past where we've had to listen to things. We've had to listen to society tell our parents that they have a big burden. What's been your experience? And I know there's plenty of groups out there which are really bringing awareness and this issue to light. So give us your experiences. Join us on the Facebook group and the Instagram, changing_suits. And we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.
Bye.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, changing_suits, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.